Okay, we're back from Thanksgiving. Been on a bit of a break, and I've heard that Riot is returning to one split a year, which is a big win. I've been saying in the last couple of videos that 3 splits a year is way too much for ranked, especially for high elo. You spend literally 3/4 of the split just climbing back to where you were, and very, very little time getting to make progression. And I think that it just feels worse, even than being stuck in a rank where you kind of get the sense that you need to improve because you're actually hard stuck at a rank, as opposed to getting reset over and over again. So let's see, they're going to talk about a lot of other stuff in the dev update besides returning to one split a year, but that's the big thing that I would focus on, that I think is important. But we'll see, what they have to say and react to that.
Hey folks, I'm Andre, also known as Mandela.
And I'm Paul, also known as Pabro. We're back with the final dev update of 2024. Today is November 8th. We just wanted to give you a warning. We will be talking about arcane spoilers in our first section. So if you haven't finished the...
Uh-oh, arcane spoilers. Why would they be talking about arcane spoilers? I actually have to skip this. I haven't seen any episodes of it. And honestly, we probably don't care.
Hey everyone, I'm Chad, aka McIver. I'm the season's lead on League of Legends.
And I'm Steph, aka 100 Piece Nuggets, or the cosmetics lead.
In the last dev update, Medler and Pabra mentioned
I
we're
won't say it.
introducing thematic seasons. So today, we're here to talk more about what a season is, what to expect with the theme, and what the experience is going to be like both on and off the Rift.
Over the years, we fleshed out the world and regions of Runeterra, as well as various alternate universes like Star Guardian, High Noon, or Darkstar. We've highlighted these worlds in moments like summer events or narrative drops around champion releases. Now we want to take that immersion further with our new seasons.
So next year, we're going to have 3 seasons, each around 8 patches long, where we're going to follow champions around different regions of Runeterra. Each one is going to have its own theme, but we're going to have an overarching narrative that connects them throughout 2025.
And each season's theme will be the anchor for most of the content going into the game as well.
In the past, we've had these big releases like Swarm or Spirit of Hearthhome. They're super memorable and fun, but they're also not connected to a larger integrated moment. And in seasons, we want everything to connect together. That means things like gameplay updates, modes, mini games, and champions will mainly have a strong tie to the season's theme.
We'll have a bunch of skins that celebrate that seasonal theme, but we'll also continue to invest in a wide variety of skin lines that are unrelated to the season as well. So expect to see cosmetics celebrating Lunar Revel or things like bees.
Ultimately, our goal is to immerse you in the parts of the world that we're visiting from the moment you open the client to the moment you see the victory screen and everything in between. So enough tiptoeing around it. We know that you want to know what Season 1 is. So for our first ever season, we are headed to the land of strength and domination, Noxus.
Hey everyone, I'm Riot Froxon, lead gameplay designer for League.
And I'm Riot Oberon, project lead of the Summoner's Rift team. Next year, when you step onto the Rift, it'll look a little bit different than you're used to. We want seasons to be a way you can immerse yourself in League, especially once you load onto the Rift. So we have a preview of some of the updates you can expect in Season 1 of 2025.
We're headed to everyone's favorite region of fierce fighters, cloak and dagger magic, and strength, above all. Prepare to be... decimated! Beyond the Noxian invasion of the map,
Holy.
we've also made some gameplay improvements and changes for next year.
First, it wouldn't be a new season without an overhaul to the item system. Just kidding. But there are some Noxian-themed boot upgrades.
These guys need to
but
stop,
it's not as simple
man.
as picking them up.
They haven't said anything yet. We'll see.
Stop. In fact, they come along with a new mechanic, Feats of Strength.
There are 3 objectives that your
Do you think this was a pun, feats of strength, because it's boots? Riot needs to stop with this stuff, okay? They really need to
can
stop.
claim throughout the game. First Blood, First Tower, and first 3 epic jungle monsters. If your team is the first to complete 2 of these 3 objectives, so for example, First Blood and First Tower, Your Tier 2 boots will transform into new versions with slightly better stats.
So I do really like this concept where you're going to get an extra reward for dominating early objectives. This is something that's going to give early game team comps a bit of a boost. And one thing that I've been noticing with League recently is that scaling champions are kind of way too strong. And a lot of that has to do with the bounty system, and objective bounties and things like that are really out of control. And so it's very difficult to end games quickly in current League. And I think that it's very difficult to put a team super far behind if you're playing an early game team versus a late game team. And it's really difficult. I mean, if you think of the timeline, like what actually ends a game of League, other than a team being completely outclassed and dominated and just losing early straight up, pretty much the win conditions for actually like winning a game of League is like ace team get Baron or get Dragon Soul. And usually nowadays, one Baron isn't even enough to end the game unless you're already pretty far ahead. Or you take the Baron, kind of late-ish into the game. So rather than like a 20-minute Baron take to end the game, you're usually talking about like, okay, maybe we can end off of like a 25-minute Baron or something like that. So when I'm looking at that, I'm thinking in my mind that like you don't get Dragon Soul, even if you're doing it as quickly as possible. The first dragon spawns at 5 minutes. You're waiting 5 minutes in between. So by the time you pick up the fourth dragon, you're getting it 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. Even if you were to get all 4 dragons in a row, on cooldown, you're talking about 20 minutes. So I think that games take, at a minimum, unless the team is absolutely getting steamrolled, very, very, very minimum, it's going to take like 25 minutes to end the game. Now, why do I say 25 instead of 20? It's because if you take Baron at 20 minutes, like I said, you're usually not in a position to actually end the game right away at 20 minutes off of it. I mean, even if you did end off of a 20-minute Baron, you're probably ending the game at like 22 minutes or something like that. With dragons, it's the same thing. Even if you get all 4 of them, you're not actually taking them all instantly when they spawn, because it takes time to take the dragon, it takes time to team fight around them, to position around them. Sometimes in the early game, you're just, even if you are ending up with soul, it's not always optimal to prioritize dragon every single time as soon as it spawns. So, it takes you 25 minutes to even get dragon soul. And that's if you're getting 4 dragons in a row. If the other team manages to take a dragon away or something like that, it adds another 5 minutes. So I think the way a lot of scaling champions and teams look at League right now is, if we can take 1 dragon away from the enemy team, we get to play the game for 30 minutes minimum. And when you start pushing 30, 35 minutes, like if you can achieve that consistently as scaling champions, you're going to win a lot of games if you can play a scaling champion and consistently hit 30, 35 minutes in the game, even if you're behind. And while there are games that end a lot faster than that, frankly, it's games where teams are just getting stomped. The games were just really one-sided, and it didn't matter. But when you have teams that are very equally matched, either in solo queue or, very good competitive teams, scaling champions are just way too strong. So one of the things that's really nice about this change is you're going to get a lot of power, and it sounds like it's going to be a pretty good chunk of power on your boots. For your entire team early for dominating early objectives, which usually, of course, early game team comps are going to do. And if late game scaling champions or team comps try to contest you at those objectives, they're going to get beat and fall further behind than they would, because they feel compelled to contest an objective when their champions aren't really ready. And so I think that's a really good change for the game.
You'll also get access to powerful Noxus-themed boots, which you can purchase as a final upgrade. We want feats of strength to celebrate early game successes without immediately snowballing the game out of control. We're experimenting with different types of power progression to see how it feels for a reward in the early game to open up more choices in the late game.
We're also introducing Nexus turret respawning. An incredibly frustrating experience is just winning a late game teamfight only to lose your Nexus turrets. You kept the game alive, but at what cost? Now it feels like your team is doomed to hang around in your base for another 200 years, babysitting an open Nexus. To give your team a better chance at coming back from these situations, your Nexus turrets will now respawn after a set time once they're destroyed. Now,
See, now this isn't that big of a deal. I don't think it'll come up in as many scenarios, for example, as the last change we talked about, right? So this early game objective is going to happen in every single game, whereas, to be honest, even though this change does the opposite, right? It helps scaling teams. It happens in a very small percentage of games that you win the game because your Nexus turret respawned. Whereas every single game, the early game team is usually going to get an advantage unless they really screw up from winning that early feats of strength challenge. So while this does help scaling team comps, it's not such a bad change because it's only happening in a small percentage of games. And so it's not like making scaling champions or comps win way too much. And then on top of that, it's rewarding scaling team comps that have basically made it to that point, but they've already lost so many turrets that, like, in theory, they should just lose anyways. And there is a very small subset of games that you'll play where it is just impossible to win, even if you've scaled, because you've already lost too many objectives. And that feels like, what's the point, right? Like, if I've lost enough objectives that I'm 100% guaranteed to lose the game, then we should just, like, lose the game and not waste our 5 minutes or whatever. But by allowing the Nexus turrets to respawn, those times are going to feel less doomed, or like maybe make people want to actually try to play the game during those times because it's actually playable, and things like that. But obviously this is a buff to scaling champions, and I'm not really a fan of it because they're already so strong, like I talked about. But it's fine. It's whatever. It's a little gimmicky. I mean, your Nexus turrets do regen HP anyways, so depending on how long the respawn timer is on this, it would even be the case that if this has a really long respawn timer, it might be the same as the regen on the turret, so that it only matters if you were to actually lose your Nexus turret and then need that in order to stall, or prevent a backdoor or something like that. So I don't think it's that crazy.
now your team can rally for an epic comeback without having to worry about a backdoor cast in.
We're also adding some new minor runes to rebalance some of the vision-related options in the domination tree. 6th Sense.
This is good. I mean, I don't even know what the changes are, but I'll tell you, as a support player with obviously a lot of understanding of vision, the ward options in the domination tree all suck across the board. They're absolutely terrible.
Grizzly Memento. A Deep Ward. As well as a new addition to the sorcery tree called Axiom Arcanist, which makes ultimates more powerful. We also couldn't resist changing items just a little bit, so we're adding some small scope adjustments to tank items and adding a new item called Bloodletter's Curse. Well, new-ish. It'll look familiar if you've spent time in Arena. But if you haven't, Bloodletter's Curse reduces the target's magic resistance from repeated spell hits, which is sort of like an AP version of Black Cleaver. Finally, let's dig into the...
That is really scary because you've already got other magic pen items in the game. I'm assuming, okay, so they said it's like Black Cleaver, so I'm assuming in the way that Black Cleaver is exclusive with LDR, Lord Dominic's Regard, I assume that this will be exclusive with other magic pen items like Void Staff or Crypt Bloom. But you still have Abyssal Mask, and I mean, maybe it's fine if it's exclusive with Void Staff, but I would worry about an item like that because when you start getting magic penetration is really powerful, and when you start getting like Abyssal Mask user in support or jungle or even in mid lane together with somebody who has a lot of magic penetration, it can be kind of game breaking. So I do worry about that, but I think it's fine. Also, mid lane champions like Cassiopeia and maybe Azir or these like DPS mid laners have kind of been out of, Azir comes back into pro play every now and again, but these champions have been really like sidelined for years and years and years from Riot. So I wouldn't say, I don't have any stake in the game because I'm not a mid laner, but I would say that like seeing a champion like Cassiopeia come back into the game for me would be fine. Like I think it's a an older, fair champion to play against one way or another, obviously, unless the numbers are insane. It's a champion that hasn't been seen, played a lot in a long time. So I would not mind a shift back to DPS mages at all. And so if that item, boosts their presence a little bit, I think that that's totally fine for the
Biggest
game.
update of the season, Adakon, Bringer of Ruin. The new epic jungle monster is drawn to death and destruction. He will spawn only once at 20 minutes on either the top or bottom side of the map, whichever side has seen the most champion damage and kills by 14 minutes. To signal where he'll make his entrance, Adakon's arena will spawn, adding new permanent walls to that side of the map. Adakon's dark influence will also cause blood roses to grow periodically in the areas where champions have been killed. More death means more roses. Blood roses drop bloody petals for your entire team, which stack any number of times and last through the entire game. For each petal collected, your whole team gains a small experience and power boost, so if you see one, grab it.
Adakon has two forms, Ruinous and Voracious. Higher action games spawn Ruinous Adakon, who you might want to fight up close and personal to avoid his constricting rings of damage, which creates the perfect chance for an ace and a steal. Killing Ruinous Adakon grants bloody petals to the team who kills him and spawns a grove of blood roses in the area for anyone to collect. Voracious Adakon spawns in lower action games. He does less damage to his enemies, but, as his name implies, is hungrier. As his health gets lower, he gets an increasingly more powerful drain ability based on missing health. The team who takes down Voracious Adakon gets a one-time rebirth buff, similar to Guardian Angel. So now you really have a reason to force that team fight.
We're introducing...
They didn't say when this spawns at. This is an absolutely crazy change. And it just blows my mind because there's going to be so many early game objectives between... We have Grubs twice. I mean, maybe that's getting replaced. But we have like Grubs twice, Rift Herald up to 2 times, Dragons every 5 minutes. Like, it's going to be really interesting too because... I think one of the biggest mistakes that people make in League is they, at different levels, but I would say as you're going up higher, is you start to understand the higher up you go, how important XP is and staying in lane actually, unless there's a really free guaranteed play. So that's why like the best laners, really high CS per minute, really high presence in their lane. They're collecting all the XP that they can from their lane, even supports. And yes, they're moving around the map when they have the opportunity to roam, but they are not wanting to fall behind in XP in order to do so. So they're finding opportune times to roam at a very minimal cost to them, not just roaming all the time. And junglers do the same thing nowadays. A lot of the highest level, very optimal junglers are clear until there is a very free opportunity to gank. So at the highest levels of play, XP is like another thing, like scaling champions. I would say XP is really strong, maybe a little bit too strong. And this is something that's really interesting about the new bounty system or objective bounty system, is that they took into account just gold overall, but not XP. And so XP is really, really powerful because XP gives you huge advantages in the game, effectively gold, right? You're getting, depending on your champion, maybe about 600 gold per level. So XP is giving you a huge advantage, not to mention the skill point. That's just in the stats, but you also get your skill point. So XP is hugely powerful, and people at high elo recognize that. So what a lot of low elo junglers do is they prioritize Dragon or Rift Herald or Grubs on cooldown whenever they possibly can. And that's not really an efficient way to play jungle, because a lot of times giving Grubs and farming or being able to invade and steal enemy camps is actually better and more efficient in terms of what you're getting out of it than just running to every objective on cooldown. Especially if you're running to every objective on cooldown when you don't even have the ability with like your laners and stuff like that to even really contest the objective, or you're just coin flipping and hoping that the enemy is not going to be there when they totally could be there and stop you from doing it. So because of that, farming is really important. Getting XP is really important. So it's interesting because now you're going to have even more objectives in the game, unless they've, again, removed like grubs, or they've removed Rift Herald or something like that. If they have even more objectives in the game, and I'm curious, when does this spawn? It sounds like it only spawns once, but when does this spawn, and how is that going to contribute to cross map, plays? Is it going to be a noob trap where people are trying to take it instead of farming? What is going to go on with this? It's also actually quite annoying for top and bot laners, because I think we all know, years ago, the story of the Scuttle Crab. And when they put the Scuttle Crab in the game, first Scuttle Crab was really, really important and a really big deal. And junglers would try to int the entire game over that first Scuttle Crab. And laners had to get used to a new form of skirmishing and team fighting, where all of the sudden at level 3, like 4 people on each team are getting drawn into the river to fight over a Scuttle Crab. And it's ridiculous, because obviously getting the golden XP and stuff like that from 2 lanes is worth a lot more than the Scuttle Crab. But because it was there, and because your junglers were going to fight over it, it was best to move towards it and try to support your team the best that you could. But it was really annoying as a laner to have to give up optimal laning to go help somebody who doesn't know any better, or try to contest this objective or have an early team fight for no good reason. And I worry that this objective could do the same thing. So what they ended up doing with Scuttle Crab is they brought down the golden XP that the first Scuttle Crab gave significantly, and I think it used to give a bunch of mana back. It gives less now or something like that, but this was years ago, so I don't remember all of it. And then that Scuttle Crab also used to only spawn 1 Scuttle Crab for first Scuttle on one side of the map randomly. And now they spawn 2 equal crabs on the opposite sides of the map, so usually junglers just trade them and then recall, or they look for that gank on their side of the map, and then recall after their full clear. And with the introduction of an objective like this, I just wonder, even if it's not on the first clear, are laners going to get dragged back into these 4-man team fights at level 3 or level 4 for no good reason over an objective that's not that good, just because junglers want to force that objective? And that is really annoying, because I think that laners don't want to have to go contest 5 different objectives a game. I have to say, as a support player who's expected in high elo to roam up to every grubs and stuff like that, and all these Rift Heralds, there's too many objectives as it is. So all I can say is I hope they removed void grubs or something like that, as compensation for this. And that could actually be okay. If this spawns once a game and they remove both void grub spawns, then you're getting rid of essentially 2 objectives and replacing it with 1, at least in terms of times that you have to move. So I think that could be fine. I mean, pretty much when you play League, there's a lot of parts of the game that are inconsistent and out of your control. And the part of the game that's most consistent and in your control is 1v1 laning or 2v2 laning. And what happens when you force 4v4 team fights is or 5v5 team fights is you're only 20% or 25% of the outcome of what's going on in that fight. So when you have a lot of fights with more and more people, you have less control over what's happening in the game and less impact over what's happening on the play. And so good players who know how to lane really well prefer solo laning or 2-on-2 laning in bot lane, and having more time to do that, because that's the part of the game that we've perfected consistently. Playing around other people who are different every game is very, very difficult, and you have less control every time there's more people in a fight. And so that's why, I would recommend to people who are trying to get better at League that you focus on your laning phase as opposed to all this other stuff, because it's the laning phase that is going to give you the biggest results, because it's the most similar game to game. Whereas the amount of ways a 2v2 lane with the same champions can play out is fairly limited compared to the amount of ways a 4v4 or a 5v5 team fight could play out in huge open space or in the river. There's just way too many combinations of the way that things can happen. And so the part of the game where you have the most control and most consistency is in your lane, and so good solo queue players have perfected their lane. When you introduce a powerful neutral objective that people have to go skirmish at, like 3v3, 4v4, 5v5, that actually takes control of the game away from an individual player, because and transfers it to how well is your team doing as a whole, how well is your team doing as a whole, how cohesive are you playing together, and how good are you at skirmishing and team fighting, rather than are you consistently better at laning than your opponents. And I think that's frustrating, because people expect if they're consistently better than their lane opponents at laning, that that skill is going to carry them very far in solo queue, and introducing objectives like this that cause more skirmishing take away from that skill that people have. And so that's kind of frustrating, actually. But anyways, not a terrible
Otacon,
change.
for a couple of reasons. First, unless you're T1, a 20-minute Baron is pretty tough to get. So removing Baron's spawn back to 25 minutes.
Whoa, that's a big change. Okay, so we just talked about like too many objectives. We also actually mentioned completely randomly that, you know, getting Baron at 20 minutes is like either doesn't do anything, even if you do get it, or it's really, really difficult. Because a lot of times at 20 minutes, you can't have Soul yet, and you haven't gotten any previous Barons. So you're getting Baron to break an inhibitor. But getting Baron to break an inhibitor is pretty bad, actually, if you think about it, even though it sounds good, right? Because what happens if you break an inhibitor is you give the enemy team more gold and XP from that super minion that's coming on every single wave. And you're not really threatening anything, especially if you take the middle inhib, because that wave can never actually threaten to take a Nexus turret by itself, because it's getting hit by 2 turrets at once when it funnels into the base. So the problem is that you actually way prefer to take an inhibitor and then later get Baron, and then use Baron with the open inhibitor to take Nexus turrets and end the game, or to open up the Nexus and then be able to threaten a backdoor to end the game, or split push to end the game, or team fight into ending the game. If you get just a 20-minute Baron, like in this situation here, they're showing a 20-minute Baron, but there's no turrets taken in base. In fact, there's even like a tier 1 top turret, tier 2 top turret, and tier 2 bot turret standing. Oh, I guess that's on their side. On the other side, well, you get the idea, right? They have a lot of turrets standing. Their base isn't broken into at all. In fact, okay, so like Genji here has all 3 tier 2 turrets. So you're taking Baron to take some tier 2 turrets. It's really, really not great. And then what happens, you take the inhib, right? And you have to wait 5 minutes for Baron to respawn anyways. And by the time you get Baron again, their inhibitors respawned. And so it's just bad timing. You know, it's a weird pacing issue. So interesting, they're pushing Baron back to 25 minutes, which in a lot of cases is not going to change much, because in most games, you weren't taking Baron in 20 to 24 minutes or whatever, 25 minutes anyways. But now it prevents you from taking it too early, and allows you to get it when it's more impactful, focus on other things first. So it's very interesting change. It has a lot of knockdown effects. The other thing that we see is because of that, there's a lot of dead time in League where it's really hard to accomplish anything when you've taken all 3 tier 1 turrets from the enemy team. And so you get to this point where it's like, okay, we can't really push and take tier 2 turrets. But like we're nowhere near Dragon Soul yet. Like maybe we could get an early Baron, but it's not going to do anything for us. And it's maybe risky unless we get a bunch of kills first anyways. So nothing's happening. And it's really easy if you're the winning team. You feel like you can be up far. You feel like you can be aggressive. You feel like you're winning and you should be accomplishing something. Especially the lower rank you go, people fall into this trap of just pushing up too far and dying even while they have a lead during this kind of dead time in the game. And actually pushing Baron back 5 minutes is going to mean more of that dead time. And 5 minutes is a lot. So that's going to be a lot of dead time in the game. But it all depends on when this new objective is going to be around.
And providing another mid-game macro option in the form of Otacon.
Okay, so they said it's mid-game. So
Second, based on how Otacon plays out each game, we hope to see more different and interesting game states in both mid and late game. And we feel that designing an objective whose spawn location, form, and rewards are decided by how you play should make each game of League feel more varied.
Our goal is for every gameplay change to make League better. As we move to seasons, this remains the same.
So they're showing here like Rift Herald, and I still forget what they call it, Otacon or something like that. But I don't know whether Grubs is still
So
there
these
or
changes were designed for the long term. That said, we'll keep an eye on how they're landing and make adjustments if needed. But for now, Articon and all the other updates are here to stay for good. We can't wait to see how these go as you start your climbs next year.
I'm sure they would have mentioned if they got rid of Void Grubs, so it sounds like they're probably not. So that's going to be crazy. I worry that it's too many objectives. I mean, I guess they did push Baron back 5 minutes, but that's a lot of objectives. So we have Otacon once a game. You've got 2 Void Grub spawns a game. Potentially, depending on when you take Rift Herald, you can get 1 or 2 Rift Heralds a game. So you can get 2 Rift Heralds a game. And then you got Dragon every 5 minutes, starting from 5 minutes. I mean, it's so many objectives. I think it's really going to force junglers especially to think about, do I want to keep farming or do I want to contest all these objectives? Even more than they already have to, because it's not that efficient to always prioritize these objectives. But it also depends on the numbers behind the objective, right? Like, how much XP does the objective give? How powerful are the roses that it's dropping, and how many of them are there? These are all going to be important in, figuring out whether, like Gromp and Wolves is more worth it than fighting over it. But I mean, that could be interesting. The other thing is, you could make an argument that if it is kind of early to mid game, around the time Rift Herald would be, usually super late game scaling comps like we talked about are not completely online at that point. So it does provide another opportunity for maybe early game teams to get even stronger off of that. And that could be a good thing. But I mean, I don't know. We'll see.
As part of building seasons, we took a look at how rewards would be part of the overall seasonal experience. That led us to updating our reward systems. That means things like event passes, champion mastery, honor rewards, etc. We felt that this was a great time to address some problems that have built up. We're going to dive into those details, so bear with us.
First, over the years, these systems have become needlessly complex. With an excessive number of currencies, unnecessary steps to craft and claim rewards, overlapping loot types, we could go on. I've been given some key fragments that you have to then craft into a key that you pair with a chest, that you open up to get another key in a chest and some essence that you open up to get a skin shard that you pair with some orange essence or reroll to eventually get a random skin. That sort of level of unnecessary complexity going on.
Secondly, those systems are all scattered throughout the client. What you can earn, how and where you can track it, etc. sucks. And third, events and the rewards being only sometimes available make some moments less rewarding to play League.
So, here are some of the changes we're making. There will always be a battle pass active, with both a free and a paid track, with the price the same as an event pass today. You'll get pass rewards through the tracks, meaning we're removing the event tokens and shop.
There will be 2 passes per season, with them tying into each season's thematic. That means most of the rewards were...
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we don't need to harp on this because this is all like cosmetic stuff anyways, but I cannot tell you the amount of times where, because I just don't care that much and pay attention to it, I have earned, my orbs and tokens and all this shenanigans in the event pass, and then the event ends and I forget to even go claim it because the thing lasts for like a month and half the events I'm not even paying attention to. And then all of a sudden the event ends. And look, not that I condone smurfing or anything like that, but if you also have many accounts, you're talking about like, okay, the event ended, so this is all the tokens I'm going to earn. I need to log into 5 different accounts to claim my rewards. And you just don't bother doing it. So a lot of times I just lose all the rewards that I earned on an account because you have to know, okay, I have like a week after the events ended or whatever to like go claim all my rewards. And I'm not paying any attention to the event because I'm just playing ranked or whatever. And then I like just lose all the rewards because it's not automatically turning into stuff for me. Whereas if it was automatically giving me a skin or automatically giving me orange essence or even blue essence or whatever, if it was just automatically giving me something, or automatically giving me keys or whatever, if it just automatically gave it to me, that would be so much nicer because then I wouldn't lose all that stuff for no reason.
To reflect what's going on.
Or have to spend 20 minutes logging into 5-6 different accounts to claim stuff.
In and around the game, and fewer random rewards. We'll have the same number of passes per year at 6, with a longer average duration per pass.
We're also moving most of our scattered reward systems to the free track of those battle passes. So, most rewards will now be in one place, with systems like Honor and Champion Mastery feeding into the pass. For example, having a high Honor level will give bonus to past experience earned.
You can earn 12 skins per year with the free pass. Half of these skins will be themed to the season you unlock them in. We'll also be simplifying the loot and crafting system. Orbs will always be available, so Masterwork chests, for example, will get phased out since they serve such a similar purpose. Overall, we want the pass to be the core vessel for how you track and earn rewards. If you choose to buy the paid version, we also want it to be very clear what you're getting and how to make the most of it.
Now, these elements have a ton of moving parts to them. There's a lot more details than what we've talked about just here. We'll cover that all in the dev blog that's out right now. Switching gears a bit, I want to talk about another change for next year that isn't quite tied to seasons, but instead by feedback from all of you. Ranked resets. These have been a topic of a lot of conversation in recent years, particularly when it comes to feelings around how often you...
So, I hate to pause at the best moment, but so I was worried because I had heard that it was going to be we're back to one split a year, but then in the start they showed that there were thematically going to be like 3 seasons a year or something like that. Now, if they want to do big visual updates to the map, or change a neutral objective or something 3 times a split or 3 times a year or whatever, that's fine, but just don't reset rank 3 times a year. So and that's good. So that's what they're going to do.
You want to restart your climbs, how fast a climb should be, what feels rewarding versus what feels like a grind, etc. And looking back, we don't think 12 resets a year has been the right call for League. So we're moving to 6 per year.
Oh, these fuckers.
Okay, just kidding. Please put down the pitchforks. We're going back to one large reset at the start of each year with no additional resets during the year.
Rank system tuning in terms of the size of the January reset, the number of the games to climb on average, and other systems will be similar to the numbers we used back in 2022 and before. That said, there will still be 3 Victoria skins you can earn, 1 for each season. If you want to earn each skin, you will need to win 15 ranked games during that season. Again though, neither your visible rank nor your MMR will reset except in January.
Next up, we want to chat about a potential replacement for quick play.
So this is obviously great. This was the main point of the video. I'm sorry we're getting to it at the end, because they talked about it at the end. But returning to one split a year, I cannot tell you how important this is to League. Like, especially for me personally, but I think, when I made the video talking about how there were way too many splits and it was killing League, I think it resonated with a lot of people, because the reality is that getting reset 3 times a year and having to spend like 200 games every split, especially for high elo, to just get back to the rank that you were at before, the LP that you were at before, is so ridiculous, because nobody has time, or most people don't have time to play 600 games to make no progress. And that means that if you're going to play 600 games to make no progress, you're not going to play at all if all you care about is making progress. So you're going to go from playing 600 to 0. And so they missed the mark, because they thought that if we reset people more, they'll have to play more to maintain their rank, and so people will play more. What actually happened, and this is so dumb that they didn't realize this, League players, especially in NA, who maybe aren't as passionate about the game, or like aren't as hardcore about grinding thousands of games like the Asian players are, no offense, but like the Korean and Chinese players are down to grind thousands of games. Like the NA players have never been down to grind thousands and thousands of games. And as a result of that happening, those changes were really bad, because a big problem we've seen in NA over the years, especially with like pro players, but I think it applies to people in general in NA, is just burnout of the game. Where if you have to play 1,000 games a year, most people aren't willing to do that and will be burnt out of the game and just quit playing it, because there's no point, there's no reward for playing and putting in a lot of effort to get good if you're forced to play that many games, and if it's not that rewarding. So going back to one reset a year is big, because I think you get 2 things. One, people can play at their own pace again. And so if I can play 200 games in December, or I don't know, let's say in December, Christmas is going on, spending a lot of time with family recently for like Thanksgiving and Christmas. Maybe in December and November, I can barely play the game. But in like the summer or something like that, students, college kids, whatever, can play a ton of the game. What ends up happening is now people can play at their own pace. So if I'm putting a lot of time into work, some months, then I don't have to play the game as much those months. And I'll make up for it when I have more free time, a different time. If I'm doing a bunch of stuff with family in the winter and I don't have as much time to play the game and to do stuff, all of a sudden it doesn't matter because I'll play a bunch, some other time throughout the year. And so you can go at your own pace, which actually might lead to more overall games play because people aren't burning out of the game. So I think what happened is a lot of people were playing more because they were forced to play more. But when they're playing more because they're forced to play more in order to maintain their rank, they just get burnt out and quit. Because people don't want to have to play 200, 400, 600 games a year to maintain their rank and not go up at all, for no reason. And the second thing is, I think obviously there's a lot of league players, we run into this all the time, spending a lot of time talking about ranked and how it works and stuff like that. There's a lot of delusional players who refuse to accept that they deserve to be the rank that they are and that they need to get better at the game. And I think it's more obvious to those people, and there would be less of those people if they were actually stuck in their rank for 100 or 200 games instead of getting reset and not being able to climb past it because of time. And so when you have a player who feels like, oh, I just can't get there to the next rank because I keep running out of time and not playing the game enough, they have no idea what their true skill cap is, what rank they can peak at and get to. And they don't necessarily think that there's anything wrong with the way that they're playing the game, or that they need to improve about the way that they're playing, because they never run into a period of time where they're hard stuck if they're getting reset constantly. So I think let them get hard stuck, so that they can see what's going on, and maybe that'll cause some people to be a little bit less delusional about the game. Honestly, hard stuck players are delusional either way, so we'll see. But that is a secondary knockdown effect. So anyways, I'll let it move on.
That we'll be trying in some regions.
But it's good stuff.
It's called Swift Play, and it's meant to be a lower stakes experience than Summoner's Rift, though with more strategic elements than you'd find in, for example, ARAM. You'll still have the same core elements that you'd expect to find in a game of Summoner's Rift, farming, snowballing, team fighting for objectives, etc. But with added changes to keep all players more competitive, like ramping gold and XP as the game goes on. Those changes won't make it so you can suddenly jump ahead of your opponent if you're 0 and 10, but they will make it so that even if you're down, you're never completely out of the game.
The fact that Swift Play is also less punishing when behind should also make the mode ideal for those of you looking to play with friends you wouldn't be willing to put your LP on the line for. As mentioned, Swift Play will be rolling out in January to replace Quick Play in select regions, so we hope you'll give it a try and let us know what you think when it hits live. We also have a blog dropping today with more details, so be sure to check that out.
I think that this is really interesting because it's really hard to practice League. And I'm not saying that the most casual game mode is going to be a good place to practice League, but one of the directions I was thinking of with this is the fact that the game pace is quicker, and the fact that in the same game, because you're the way that constantly getting golden XP like you do in ARAM would work is if somebody is ahead of you 2,000 gold to 1,000 gold, right? You're way far behind compared to that person. They're 100% up on you. But if you're all getting the same amount of golden XP constantly, their lead shrinks. So when they're at 1,000 XP lead, but they're at 3,000 and you're at 2,000, now all of a sudden their XP lead is only 50% bigger than yours instead of 100%. What this means is that it's a really good practice mode because you get to spend the same amount of time that you would playing through a normal game, or I guess it would be quicker, but basically you get to experience the whole progression, but sped up a little bit. And so if you want to practice fighting with different champions at different levels, at different gold values and stuff like that, and be able to play really aggressively, but then not fall as far behind as you would in a normal game of League, and then be able to go at it again, it ruins the dynamics of the practice a little bit, that you're going to, like, your XP and gold are going to be weird, but it does enable you to have a better chance of fighting at certain states. So I wonder if it'd be a really good way to actually practice playing League, to be able to like run through a game quicker and to be able to fight more often at different states, and to be able to kind of come back in gold deficit and then try fighting them again at a different position. I think that that's really interesting for learning the game quickly. And so that could be really cool, actually. And I think that for a casual game mode, that's great, because, and then the other thing that it does is, I honestly think that even with quick play being even quicker than like blind pick was, blind pick and draft pick, or quick play and draft pick, are the same, right? The only difference is a draft. And so having two separate queues where you have to wait longer to get into one versus the other just doesn't make any sense intuitively, right? So one of the things that this will improve is probably queue times, potentially, for draft pick, because people who are looking to play the actual game without this accelerated experience are all going to be queuing for draft now, because quick play will just be gone, and replaced with something completely different. And so it could be a really good practice tool game, or a kind of like way to practice different champions. Could be really good for playing casually, and could improve queue times for draft pick, actually, in normals, which I think is all great. So that seems like a really interesting change.
And last, but hopefully not least, we've got some changes coming to the practice tool. Over the years, you've told us that it's a useful but somewhat limited way to get better at League.
Okay, I'm just going to call it, the biggest problem with practice tool is that you cannot have more than one person in practice tool. Let's see if they do it.
The most common desire...
Oh, it says it. My camera's blocking
we've seen people
it.
bring up is to practice with other players, whether it's in one-on-one duels with a friend or on a full team fight drill with a pre-made team.
Practice tool wasn't built with multiplayer in mind. And we've had some cautions about how League could be a lot less fun if the optimal way to get better is to spend almost all your time in practice tool rather than playing real games. But we do think we've likely been too cautious here. So we're going to be giving multiplayer practice tool a try. You should see that on the PBE soon. It's an experimental feature, and we'll probably encounter an interesting range of bugs. That said, though, we're looking into whether we can ship it as part of season start in January. And if that's not on track,
it sounds like it's going to get delayed.
Before we wrap up, one last...
That's really good, though. Like, for high-level competitive play and being able to test interactions and things like that is so important to be able to get multiplayer practice tool. The fact that it's even taken 15 years to get multiplayer practice tool is so insane. It's crazy. Like, of course, for professional players, the optimal way to practice like your lane and all kinds of things is to be able to run a scrim where you can hit the reset button, or you can run a 1v1 and then hit the reset button, instantly go again, go again, go again, go again. Obviously, that's the best way. On top of that, practice tool does already have some features built into it, like being able to spawn certain types of dragons, being able to fast forward to certain game times and things like that. It's not a perfect tool. There's definitely more tools that practice tool needs, but just allowing the current tool set to be used with multiple people is huge for practicing. And it doesn't mean that the casual player is going to go into practice tool and be doing all this stuff anyways. Because frankly, the casual player who is even going into practice tool and doing stuff doesn't have someone available 24/7 to run into a practice tool with them and try stuff. But it's really, really big. And they could do that already in a 1v1 custom game and stuff like that, just without the tools to be able to like reset quickly or, spawn certain objectives or fast forward or put target dummies and things like that down. But there's definitely some interesting stuff that will be discovered through allowing this to be the case. And I think it'll push the game forward. And it'll also help professional players and teams and like semi-pro teams and stuff like that get a lot better quickly, which I think is really good for the game. So yeah. Okay, what else did they got to yap about?
Seasons thing. We'll be changing up how we name patches to match seasons. So instead of patch 15.1 coming out in January, it'll be patch 25.s1.1.
Yeah, this is dumb. One of the things that I really hate about them calling it Season 1 is that it just screws with all of the notation, because it's so simple. It's like, okay, We have season 1, season 2, season 3 through season 14, right? And then you have the patches, and the patches are just, okay, if we're in season 14, it's 14.1, or you just say, patch 14.1 or whatever. To change it to whatever he just said, what did he say? 25, because that's the year. S1, what did he say?
Seasons 13.1 coming out in January. It'll be patch 25.s1.1.
25.s1.1. It's just too complicated. Like, the old system worked perfectly fine. It's actually really annoying that when they did have multiple splits a year, that also ruined notation, because all of a sudden on op.gg and all these sites and stuff like that, trying to keep track of your season stats, you should see my Google Doc. It's just a disaster, because you had, again, season 1 through like 12. And then in season 13, when there were 2 splits, it became season 13 split 1, season 13 split 2, and it's like 2 different tabs on op.gg, even though it was the same year, same season. It's like weird. And then even worse for season 14, because now we had 3 splits. So now we have season 14 split 1, season 14 split 2, season 14 split 3. And it's like, okay, I got to make a new table on my Google Doc sheet to keep track of my stats. I got to make one for every split now. So that's another advantage of getting rid of all these splits. But yeah, the notation's just weird. Like, just call it season 15 and patch 15.1. It's so easy. Can we just do that? It's so annoying that they're going to screw up the entire patch notation.
Calling out the year,
whatever.
season, and patch number. Season 2 will then kick off in patch 25.s2.
And then it's even worse, because instead of going from season 1, I thought, okay, they're going to start season 1, because like 14, 15, it was getting a little bit high, right? So we're just going to start counting over again at the 15-year anniversary. So like, okay, we'll start at season 1 again, season 2, season 3, season 4, season 5. We're chilling. But no, there's 3 seasons a year. And that's even more confusing, because now we had 2 splits a year, then 3 splits a year. Now we're having 3 seasons a year, but not in terms of ranked resets. Just stick to something. It's so dumb.
You get the idea.
Okay, that is it from us today. The next time you hear from us will be in January, at the start of the season.
Wonderful.
We'll be back then to share some extra stuff that'll come out later in season 1.
Okay,
we
that's
do want to
good
acknowledge,
enough.
though, that we've covered most of the big changes that you'll see day 1 next
Okay,
year.
goodbye.
That said, still got a few surprises left.
And of course, we'll have the cinematic to kick things off. To no one's surprise, we can confirm that it's also going to focus a lot on Noxus and Noxian champions, but that's all we can share for now.
We hope you all have a great December.
Great. Their cinematic this year isn't going to be a rock. Okay, wonderful. Good job, Riot. Pretty good changes overall. We'll have to see. I think most of the changes are just good. And the only bad thing is that Otacon or whatever, I think, could be too many objectives. We'll have to see. I think it'll not only too many objectives, but I think its placement and its randomness is going to cause a lot of randomness in games, which is really annoying as a good solo queue player, because the last thing you want in solo queue is more random shenanigans determining games. You want consistency. You want your lane to be the most impactful thing dominating the game. That's where you have the most control over what's happening in the game. Having more team fights and skirmishes relying on multiple people is not fun, and does not consistently allow you to carry solo queue games, so that is frustrating. Makes the game harder to 1v9, etc. That being said, only BenTbeyondrepair could turn Riot's 15-minute dev update into a 1-hour video. So if you like my ability to yap, please like and subscribe. Goodbye.